Hello great readers. I'm Belchan.
I'm Nimakong.
I'm Banchan.
In this class, I'll read all of your part of Great Expectations.
As.
Great Expectations. Charles Dickens. Chapter 50. My hens had been dressed twice or thrice in the night, and again in the morning. My left arm was a good deal burned to the elbow, and then, less severely, as high as the shoulder. It was very painful, but the flames had set in that direction, and I felt thankful it was no worse. My right hand was not so badly burnt but that I could move the fingers. It was bandaged, of course, but much less inconveniently than my left hand and arm. Those I carried in a sling, and I could only wear my coat like a cloak, this over my shoulders and fastened at the neck. My hair had been caught by the fire, but not my head or face. When Herbert had been down to Hammersmith and seen his father, he came back to me at our chambers and devoted the day to attending on me. He was the kindest of nurses, and at stated times took off the bandages and steeped them in the cooling liquid that was kept ready, and put them on again, with a patient tenderness that I was deeply grateful for. At first, as I lay quiet on the sofa, I found it painfully difficult, I might say impossible, to get rid of the impression of the glare of the flames, their hurry and noise, and the fierce burning smell. If I dozed for a minute, I was awakened by Miss Havisham's cries, and by her running at me with all that height of fire above her head. I suffered, and Herbert, seeing that, did his utmost to hold my attention engaged. Neither of us spoke of the boat, but we both thought of it. That was made apparent by our avoidance of the subject. Question of so many hours, not of so many weeks. My first question when I saw Herbert had been, of course, whether all was well down the river. As he replied in the affirmative, with perfect confidence and cheerfulness, we did not resume the subject until the day was wearing away. But then, as Herbert changed the bandages, more by the light of the fire than by the outer light, he went back to it spontaneously. I sat with Provis last night. Andal. Dear little thing, said Herbert. She was up and down with Gruff and Grim all the evening. He was perpetually picking at the floor the moment she left his sight. I doubt if he can hold out long, though. And then you will be married. Back off the sofa, my dear boy, and I'll sit down here and get the bandage so gradually that you shall not know when it comes. I was speaking of Provis. Do you know? Andal. So you did. And so he is. He was very communicative last night, and told me more of his life. I had started, but not under his touch. His words had given me a start. I had forgotten that. Herbert. Well, he went into that part of his life and a dark wild part it is. Shall I tell you? Tell me by all means. Herbert bent forward to look at me more nearly. Quite account for. Your head is cool, he said. Touching that. Quite, said I. Tell me what Provy said. It seems, said Herbert. There's a bandage of most charmingly. And now comes the cologne makes you shrink at first. My poor dear fellow. Don't it? But it will be comfortable presently. It seems that the woman was a young woman. And a jealous woman. And a revengeful woman. Revengeful. And I don't feel it. How did she murder? Why, the deed may not have merited quite so terrible a name, said Herbert. But she was tried for it. And Mr. Jaggers defended her. And the reputation of that defence first made his name known to Provies. It was another and a stronger woman who was the victim. And there had been a struggle in a barn. Who began it? Or how fair it was? Or how unfair? Maybe doubtful. But how it ended is certainly not doubtful. No. She was acquitted. My poor Handel. It is impossible to be gentler. Herbert. Yes. This acquitted young woman in Provies had a little child. A little child of whom Provies was exceedingly fond. As I tell you, the young woman presented herself before Provies for one moment, and swore that she would destroy the child which was in her possession, and he should never see it again. Then she vanished. There's the worst arm comfortably in this thing once more. And now there remains but the right hand, which is a far easier job. I can do it better by this light than by a stronger. Don't think your breathing is affected. My dear boy? Perhaps I do. Herbert. There comes the darkest part of Provies' life. That is. Why? Of course. My dear boy, returned Herbert, in a tone of surprise, and again bending forward to get an early look at me. He says it all. The man. Whether, pursued Herbert, he had used the child's mother ill, or whether he had used the child's mother well. Provies didn't say. To us at this fireside, and he seems to have felt pity for her, and forbearance towards her. Therefore, fearing he should be called upon to depose about this destroyed child, and so be the cause of her death, he hid himself much as he grieved for the child, kept himself back, as he says, out of the way and out of the trial. It was only vaguely talked of as a certain man called Abel, out of whom the jealousy arose. After the acquittal she disappeared. A moment, my dear boy, and I have done. That evil genius, Compeyson, the worst of scoundrels among many scoundrels, for doing so, per in working him hard. I want to know, said I, and particularly, how Bert, particularly, let me remember, then, what he said as to that. His expression was, I ran score you go. It had happened some 3 or 4 years then. He said, and you brought into his mind the little girl so tragically lost. Herbert lay. After a short silence, in a hurried way, can you see me best by the light of the window, by the firelight, and Sir Herbert, coming close in. I do look at you. I do touch you. You are not afraid that I am in any fever. And now, my dear boy, Sir Herbert, after taking time to examine me, you are rather excited. I know I am quite myself. And the men we have been hiding down the river. To be continued.